Good morning, students. Today we will see our next lesson, that is the American War of Independence. In this lesson, students, we are going to see how the Americans fought against the British government for their independence. Students, you know very well that after the Industrial Revolution in European countries, they wanted to gain marketplaces. That's why they were interested to make colonies to other nations. In that search only, Columbus also visited various continents. So some of them just visited to America, North America, and after visiting that place, they just created their colonies there. They established their colonies there. Near about 13 colonies were there of British in America. But just because of the pressurizing rules regulations, they were get rid of the British Empire or British government, and afterwards they decided to fight against the British government. And finally on 1763 they got the independence. At first we will see the European colonies in America. Whenever the discovery of America by Columbus in Columbus discovered America in 1492 AD, and afterwards by visiting Columbus, other European countries also established their colonies in America. In North America, there were 13 colonies along the Atlantic coast in America, manned mostly by the British settlers or English settlers. The roots of the American Revolution can be traced to the year, means they started to create revolt, or they started to revolt against the British Empire from 1763, when British leaders began to tighten imperial reins. Whenever the British leaders started to pressurize the Americans, and by that the economic and political condition of the Americans started to collapse, and by that the political measures, the harmonious relations between Britain and the colonies became increasingly tense. Means what? The relation of the British and Americans started to become tensed. And afterwards the British leaders created Sugar Act, Stamp Act and Townshend Acts, by which the Americans started to angry again. Now we have to see the causes of the American War of Independence. First cause is the mismanagement of the colonies. Most of the people, they were settled in the colonies, they were from England, and that was their wish. They wanted that freedom those the Englishmen are enjoying in England. But they were thinking that the governors appointed by them, they are not paying attention towards the freedom of Americans. That's why they became disappointed, and they started to act against the interests of the British government. And by that the colonies had their elected assemblies. After that they just made elected assemblies and appointed governors, but they also they were not responsible to these assemblies because they were listening the orders by the British government. That's why they became disappointed. Second cause is economic exploitation of the colonies. England wanted to exploit the colonies. Means what? England North America was the colony of British government. That's why they wanted to exploit the colony to the maximum, but they were not prepared for this, because what? They just wanted to get more and more colonies, but for that they didn't have that much financial conditions, and for that they were started to arrange various types of taxes. They started to create various types of acts or measures, and by this the colonies wish was to run their business and industries themselves, but British government passed or started various types of acts which was burdened for the Americans. Then third reason was the 7 Years' War with France. 7 Years' War which was fought in 1756 to 63. between England and France, in America, India, and Central Europe countries. By that war, the England had spent a lot on the defense of her colonies, so it wanted to impose more taxes on the colonies. That's why the colonies refused to share the burden. Means what was the wish? England just spent lot of amount for that 7 years war, and that was the expectation of British government, that the British colonies which were there in America, they should share the burden of England. But Americans were not ready to share the burden because they didn't have that much condition. Then the next topic is immediate cause of the revolt. As per we have studied, in 1857 there was also immediate cause. Here also the same situation. Various act was passed by the British government on Americans. First one was Sugar Act. Sugar Act just banned the import of molasses from overseas countries except England. Only England could send their molasses towards the America. That's how what happened. Whatever price British was asking, that should be payable to the Americans. That's why they were not agreed to follow that act. And they just what British did, they were imposed on tax on wine, silk, coffee, and other articles of luxury also. Means whatever products Americans were using by the British, that they should have to pay heavy taxes to the British Empire or government. And the local traders could neither buy sugar at cheap rate nor obtain molasses to make rum by the Sugar Act. That's why they became disappointed. Students, molasses means what? Whenever the sugar is made by the sugar cane, the brown juice is obtained, dark brown juice is obtained. This is thick, that is called as per the molasses. That act was just the policy of George III and his Prime Minister Grenville. They just made that policies against the colonies. That three acts: Sugar Act, Stamp Act, and Declaratory Act. And that's how what happened. That anger just raised in the minds of Americans. Stamp Act was passed by the British Parliament on March Stamp Act was passed by the British Parliament on March 22nd, 1765. The new tax was imposed on all American colonies and required them to pay a tax on every piece of printed paper they used from the British government. For example, ship's papers, legal documents, licenses, newspapers, and other publications, and even playing cards also taxed. The money collected by the Stamp Act was to be used to help pay the cost of defending and protecting the American frontier near the Appalachian Mountains. That money should be used for the sake of defending and protecting the American frontier colonies. The Stamp Act met with great resistance in the colonies. It was seen as a violation of the right of Englishmen to be taxed only with their consent. Means what? Just because of Stamp Act, the Americans became disappointed because that was used for the sake of the English people only. Consent which could only be granted through their colonial legislatures. A new slogan was coined. Means what? Whatever legislatures were just done, that was done by the English people only. There was not a single American involved in that legislature. That's why they coined and raised a slogan that was no taxation without representation. If there will be any representative of America, then only they were ready to pay the taxes. The Stamp Act. Now Declaratory Act we have to see. The Stamp Act met with great resistance. Just because of Stamp Act, people became too much angry, and after that the British Parliament declared that the British Parliament was fully empowered to impose taxes on America. That was declared by the British Parliament, that whatever taxes British wanted to power on impose on America, they should have to accept that taxes as per America was the colony of British. The British government followed a discriminatory policy of taxation all the other companies involved in a tea business. It means whenever British government could impose the taxes, they were doing that without thinking of a while also. Even they started to tax on the tea also. Tea was necessity product for Americans, and only tea should all the tea producers should have to pay taxes instead of British. So by that, the group of colonists became angry, and they just disguised themselves as per the original people, and they just whatever tea containers were there on Boston port, they just took and throw in the water of harbor, and afterwards the water's color became changed, and that's why that is called as per the Boston Tea Party. After that movement, which was done by the Americans, Parliament became angry, and they started a series of punitive measures that is known as Intolerable Acts, which among other measures closed the port of Boston. And finally, British government just closed the Boston port, means nobody can use that port. The fuse that led directly to the explosion of American independence was lit, and just because of that, American decided to do movement against the British government, and that is called as American Independence War. The second Congress, which was made of American leaders, they just gathered at Philadelphia, and they just decided George Washington as per their leader. For that, they just created their own written constitution that is of 13 pages. What they just did, they just wanted to take action against the intolerable acts of the British government. For that, what they they adopting the United States Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, that was drafted by Thomas Jefferson. Finally, the war broke out in 1775. The colonial forces were organized by the commander-in-chief, which was chosen by other colonist leaders. He was George Washington. France, Spain, and Netherlands also supported the colonies, and after various battles were just done in America and between America and Britain, finally Britain surrendered in 1781 in front of America, and the Treaty of Paris was signed on 3rd September 1783, and the United States of America was formed and given independence from Britain. Now students, now we have to see the significance of that American War of Independence and what was the impact of that war on other countries. At first we will see America's impact. America emerged as a new state, namely United States of America, in short USA, as a sovereign independent country which is having a first written constitution in the world. Then American industry also got a big boost as it got rid of restrictions imposed by England. Secondly, we have to see impact on England. As England lost its colony, it had rather bad effects. First, it brought a loss to her trade. All the trades and commerce was just shaken off England just because of the loss of America. It increased her national debts and led to financial crisis. Slowly, Britain just faced a financial crisis just because of the heavy loss of that colony. It served a great blow. American Independence War just served a great blow to power and the prestige of England as a country. As a country, it was a shameful thing for England, and that's why it was a great blow. King George's personal rule in England practically came to an end. Afterwards, King George just lost his post. Third, we have to see impact on France. American Revolution, just because of American Revolution, French Revolution also happened in 1789 because it inspired the French people that they could ask independence from King Louis XVI, who was making cunning laws for the people of France. Even French people just took the title like liberty, equality, and fraternity by the American War of Independence. Then we have to see impact on world. By the American Revolution, a new vigor of the anti-colonial revolutionaries started in the entire world. Even in our country also, we fought against the British government, and finally in 1947 we got our independence. But just because of that revolution, France became the enemy of British, and whenever they also, both of them just started to make trade, to do trade in our country. At that time, British every time opposed to French, and just because of that, French could not make the better colony in India. But after that, the nationalists in India, they were ardently inspired by the American Revolution, and we also got independence. Third, the declaration prepared ground for political philosophy and revolutionary ideas in the European history in the 19th century. Means what? Whatever philosophers and writers got ideas and information by the American War of Independence, they wrote in their books or writing material, and afterwards other also got inspiration by that. Means everywhere the philosophy and revolutionary ideas just reached after the American War of Independence. Students, I have sent question answers of this. Now the lesson and syllabus is over.